You've been lied to since your first school test. The biggest myth in learning isn't that you need to be smart, it's that you need to look smart. Memorize the terms, spit out definitions, nod along in class. Fake it, and maybe you'll make it. But here's the agony. You feel you're progressing, but when you face a real challenge, your mind goes blank. You stare at the question, and your brain serves static. This is the pain of studying wrong. You think you're moving forward, but you're running on a treadmill of illusions. Each hour spent reciting facts feels productive, but deep down, you sense the truth. Nothing sticks. You're stuck in the shallow end, terrified of swimming into deeper waters. You're not learning. You're rehearsing lines for a play you don't understand. Why? Because the system rewards surface. Gold stars for correct answers, not for understanding. Praise for quick recall, not for insight. You become an actor, not a thinker. And it's exhausting. Every exam feels like a tightrope walk. One slip, and your bluff collapses. You're constantly on guard, afraid someone will ask the one question that exposes you. Picture this. You're building a house, brick by brick, but the foundation is sand. It looks impressive from a distance, but the first storm, an unexpected question, a real-world problem, washes it all away. That's what happens when you build knowledge on pretending. The cracks show in conversations, problem-solving, and moments when you should connect the dots and can't. You freeze, embarrassed. You blame yourself. But the fault is in the method, not in your mind. The worst part? You're not alone. Most people are stuck in this loop, cramming, regurgitating, forgetting. You survive the test, but the knowledge evaporates the next week. The comfort of pretending lulls you into intellectual sleep. You stop asking, "Do I really get this?" and start asking, "Did I memorize enough?" Here's the real danger. The better you get at pretending, the deeper the trap. You start believing your own act. The habit becomes invisible, a mental autopilot that sabotages true understanding. Feynman called it knowing the name of something but not knowing the thing. But here's the error everyone makes. You think this is just about school. It isn't. This habit infects your work, your conversations, your ability to solve problems in life. You nod along in meetings, repeat buzzwords, and hope no one notices you're lost. You read articles, watch tutorials, and convince yourself you've learned, when all you've done is collect labels. If you're tired of this cycle, of feeling smart on the surface and lost underneath, you're ready for a mind shift. If you want to join the minority who study to understand, not just to pass, subscribe. The next step is seeing how Feynman shattered this myth himself. Feynman didn't just accept answers, he dismantled them. Picture him at Princeton, staring at a blackboard covered in equations. While everyone nodded, Feynman squinted and asked, "But what does this really mean?" He treated knowledge like a block of metal, not a fragile ornament. If you couldn't drop it, dent it, or break it apart, it wasn't real understanding. Once, in a meeting, colleagues discussed the energy in a glass of water. They threw around technical jargon. Feynman interrupted. "Suppose you're a Martian and you've never seen water. How would you explain it?" Everyone went silent. That's the difference. Most people repeat words. Feynman used curiosity as a chisel. He wanted to see the gears inside, the why and how, not just the nameplate. He never hesitated to expose his own ignorance. In fact, he saw it as a starting point, not a flaw. To him, pretending to understand was the real intellectual crime. Here's the analogy. Imagine learning is like assembling a machine. Most students paint the outside and memorize the labels. Feynman would take a screwdriver, open the casing, and poke every wire. If something sparked, he'd ask why. If a part didn't fit, he'd admit it and dig deeper. No shame in not knowing, only in pretending. He'd rather be the person who asks the dumb question than the one who sits quietly, lost, but proud. Feynman's notebooks were filled with plain language, sketches, and absurd questions. He'd write, "I don't understand this yet." That wasn't weakness, it was precision. He believed you must be honest with yourself first, or you're just stacking blocks on sand. The world rewards those who fake understanding. Feynman did the opposite. Every time he exposed a gap in his knowledge, he got stronger. He called it leaning into ignorance. He once said, "I would rather have questions that can't be answered than answers that can't be questioned." This wasn't just a clever line, it was a way of life. He didn't care if others thought he was slow, as long as he was moving in the right direction. He saw learning as a process of stripping away illusions, not collecting badges. This is the lens you need, relentless self-honesty. It's not about being smarter, it's about refusing to settle for hollow explanations. Feynman's approach wasn't about memorizing more, but about understanding deeper. He knew that if you can't explain something simply, you don't really get it. That's why he'd force himself to teach concepts to imaginary students, or even to his own reflection, until every part made sense without jargon or shortcuts. But here's the error everyone makes next. They trust the traditional method, thinking repetition creates understanding. It doesn't. The next block will show why your brain is designed to fall for this trap and how to break it. Your brain is a master of shortcuts. It prefers a paved sidewalk over hacking through a jungle. Repetition feels like walking that smooth path. Automatic, easy, familiar. But here's the twist. What feels easy rarely means you understand. Imagine staring at a city map every day, tracing the same route with your finger. Soon you could draw that line from memory. But if someone drops you in the city, can you actually navigate the streets? Most people freeze, lost. The mental map never became a real-world skill. This is your neural wiring at work. The brain rewards fluency and speed, recognition, not comprehension. It's called the fluency illusion. When you repeat something enough, you start mistaking familiarity for mastery. It's the difference between knowing the name of a street and being able to find your way there blindfolded. Here's the cruel joke. Your biology is designed to save energy. Deep understanding is metabolically expensive. Your brain wants to avoid it. It prefers patterns, surface-level cues, anything to avoid genuine work. That's why rereading, rewriting notes, and rote memorization feels so productive. They're candy for your neurons, sweet but empty. Feynman called this cargo cult learning. You mimic the rituals of real understanding, reciting, repeating, regurgitating, hoping the plane of knowledge will land. But it never does, because the runway isn't built. You don't have the structure underneath. Every time you say, "I get it," after seeing the same problem for the 5th time, pause. Are you recognizing the pattern, or do you truly understand the machinery behind it? This is the invisible wall between memorization and understanding. Your brain, left unchecked, will always choose the wall. It's efficient, but efficiency is the enemy of insight. But here's the error everyone makes next. They confuse the feeling of progress with real progress. The brain loves the dopamine hit of checking a box, finishing a chapter, or reciting a definition. But ask yourself, could you explain this to a child? Could you teach it without notes? Or are you just stacking bricks with no mortar? Think of your memory as a warehouse. Repetition piles boxes higher, but understanding builds shelves. Without structure, everything collapses when you need to retrieve something under pressure. Exams, real-world problems, or unexpected questions expose the weakness instantly. The education system exploits this flaw. It rewards speed, not depth. It praises those who can regurgitate, not those who can reconstruct. Your biology and your environment conspire to keep you on the shallow end. But Feynman saw through this. He refused to trust the feeling of familiarity. He interrogated his own mind, searching for gaps, not comfort. He knew the brain's love for shortcuts was a trap, a beautiful, deadly trap. The next time you feel the urge to reread a page or repeat a fact, remember, that's your biology baiting you. If you want real understanding, you have to break the shortcut and build the map yourself. So, how do you force your brain off the easy path? That's where Feynman's principle kicks in. First, Feynman drew a bright line between understanding and naming. Knowing the name of something isn't knowing the thing. It's like standing outside a locked door and pretending you know what's inside just because you've read the label. Your mind loves labels. It feels quick, safe, and finished. But this is intellectual camouflage. Feynman's core principle is ruthless. If you can't explain it to a child, you don't understand it, not in your bones. This isn't a motivational quote, it's a neurological reality. Your brain is a prediction machine. If you only memorize names and formulas, you're outsourcing meaning to symbols. When reality throws a curveball, your memory cracks. You freeze. Because you never built the model, you just learned the vocabulary. Here's the analogy. Imagine you're trying to fix an engine. You know the parts names, but you have no idea how they interact, what role they play, or why the engine runs at all. When it sputters, you're paralyzed. But the person who understands combustion, pressure, and timing, they see the invisible. Names are surface, understanding is depth. Feynman called out this mental laziness everywhere. In science, in everyday talk, even in self-reflection. He'd say, "What do you really know? Can you work it out from scratch?" That's the principle. Deep learning means building mental models, not collecting trivia. Your neurons wire together through explanation, not recitation. But here's the mistake everyone makes, confusing the ability to recite for the ability to reason. The brain rewards you for familiarity, but familiarity is not fluency. It's an illusion of mastery. The moment you're forced to improvise, to connect the dots, the illusion shatters. The label falls off, and you're left with emptiness. So, Feynman's litmus test is brutal but liberating. If you can't teach it simply, you don't own it. And that's the first principle you need to break the fake knowing habit for good. But let's dig deeper. Why does your brain cling to naming? Because it's efficient. Your mind is wired to conserve energy. True understanding is metabolically expensive. It requires you to build, test, and sometimes destroy your own mental models. That's uncomfortable. It's much easier to memorize a definition and move on. But this shortcut is a trap. When you face a real problem, one that doesn't fit the textbook, the memorized name is useless. You need to see the engine, not just the label. Feynman's genius was his relentless curiosity. He'd strip away jargon until only the raw mechanism remained. He'd ask, "What happens if I change this? Why does that follow?" He didn't care about sounding smart. He cared about seeing clearly. That's the principle. Never settle for the label. Always demand the mechanism. Here's the epiphany. Every time you stop at a name, you're building a wall between yourself and reality. Every time you push for the mechanism, you're tearing that wall down. The world opens up. You stop being a parrot and become a thinker. That's the Feynman shift. So how do you actually do this? Feynman's approach is as brutal as it is liberating. Grab a blank page. At the top, write the concept you think you understand. Now explain it, as if teaching a curious child. No jargon, no shortcuts. If you stall, if you reach for fancy words, circle that spot. That's the crack hiding your ignorance. Picture a mechanic with an engine on the table. He doesn't just admire the shiny cover. He takes it apart, piece by piece, until every gear and piston is exposed. If he can't explain what a part does, he doesn't pretend. He finds out. Your mind must work the same way. If you can't explain how the gear turns, you don't understand the watch. Next, break the concept into parts. For each, ask, why does this happen? How does this part connect to the others? When you hit a blank, don't bluff, admit it. That's not weakness, that's honesty as a tool. Feynman called this the difference between knowing the name of something and knowing something. Now, return to your sources, not to memorize, but to fill gaps. Seek the mechanism, not the label. Each time you clarify a piece, rewrite your explanation, simpler and clearer. Repeat. Each cycle, you get closer to true understanding. This is the grind that most avoid, but it's where the gold is. This isn't about elegant notes or beautiful diagrams. It's about exposing the weak joints. Feynman used this to learn everything, from quantum physics to safecracking. You can use it on anything: biology, math, history, programming. The subject doesn't matter. The process does. But here's the error everyone makes. They stop at the first pass. They rewrite, then move on, assuming the job is done. Feynman never let himself off the hook so easily. He kept asking, kept circling back, kept poking until the concept was bulletproof. He didn't care if it took hours or days. He cared about clarity. You'll feel resistance. Your brain wants to gloss over gaps. That's a signal. Dig there. The more you resist, the more important that spot is. Make the confusion explicit. That's the only way through. Most people run from confusion. Feynman ran toward it because he knew that's where real learning begins. Start small. Choose one idea today. Write, simplify, question, repair. Repeat. One concept, fully conquered, is worth 1,000 half-knowns. You don't need to master everything at once. You need to master the art of not lying to yourself. That's the Feynman method in action. Relentless honesty, radical simplicity, and the courage to admit what you don't know yet. But here's what almost no one admits. Your biggest obstacle isn't ignorance. It's the comfort of pretending you know. Your brain is a master illusionist. It paints over cracks in your understanding, like a sloppy artist covering mold with fresh paint. At first glance, everything looks clean, but the rot is still there, quietly spreading. You reach for shortcuts, memorize jargon, recite definitions. You tell yourself, I get it. But ask yourself a real question, something that pokes at the foundation, not the surface, and suddenly you hesitate. That hesitation is gold. It's the signal you're about to learn something real, if only you don't look away. Why do you look away? Because your ego hates blank spaces. It wants to be right, to be done, to be secure. Admitting ignorance feels like failure. But Feynman saw it as the only honest starting point. He built his genius on a mountain of admitted ignorance. That's why his knowledge was unshakable. It rested on honest ground, not wishful thinking. Here's the trap. The more you fake competence, the harder it gets to see where you're lost. Self-deception layers up, like fog on glass. Soon, you can't tell what you really understand. You become a stranger to your own mind. Feynman called out this habit relentlessly. He said, the first principle is that you must not fool yourself, and you are the easiest person to fool. So, every time you gloss over a gap, every time you nod instead of asking, every time you parrot instead of probing, you're building the invisible wall higher. But there's an epiphany here. That wall isn't made of lack of intelligence. It's made of pride and fear. Tear it down, and your brain is free to reconstruct reality, piece by piece, the Feynman way. If you feel resistance to this process, good. That's the point. That's the signal that you're close to real change. Let's make this visual. Picture a brick wall. Each brick stamped with a phrase, I already know this. I don't need to ask. It's obvious. Every time you avoid a question, you add another brick. Over years, the wall grows thick and high. You can't see what's on the other side, real understanding, because you're trapped behind your own construction. But Feynman's approach is a sledgehammer. He smashed through with questions. What does this really mean? Could I explain this to a child? Where does my explanation break down? Each honest question removes a brick. Each admission of ignorance lets in light. The hardest part isn't intellectual, it's emotional. You have to tolerate the discomfort of not knowing. You have to risk looking foolish, even to yourself. But that's the price of clarity. The moment you stop pretending, you start learning. The wall crumbles. The landscape of knowledge opens up. Here's the error everyone makes: thinking that confidence comes from knowing more. Feynman knew that real confidence comes from knowing exactly where your knowledge ends. That's the only place you can build further. So next time you feel that urge to gloss over, to nod along, to move on without digging deeper, pause. That's the moment of truth. That's where the invisible wall can finally come down. But don't think this is just about textbooks or exams. This mental habit, faking comprehension, infects every area of life. It's the silent virus in meetings, relationships, even self-reflection. Imagine an engineer who recites formulas but can't build a bridge, or a manager who quotes leadership books but can't lead a team. The same mental shortcut, the urge to appear knowledgeable, cripples them both. Here's the analogy. Picture a fogged-up window. From the inside, you see vague shapes and colors, and convince yourself you know what's out there. But open the window, face the cold clarity, and suddenly the world is sharp, detailed, alive. Most people keep the window closed. It feels safer. They mistake comfort for understanding. The fog is the illusion of knowledge. The open window is the discomfort of confronting your ignorance. But only through that discomfort does real clarity emerge. Feynman lived with the window wide open. He didn't care if he looked foolish for asking basic questions. He cared about seeing the actual world. That's why he could leap between quantum physics, art, and teaching with the same childlike curiosity. He didn't compartmentalize his mind. He knew this habit, pretending to know, was the enemy of real progress in any field. He once said, "I would rather have questions that can't be answered than answers that can't be questioned." That's not just a clever phrase. It's a blueprint for living with intellectual honesty. So take this lens and look everywhere. Are you nodding through conversations without grasping them? Are you adopting beliefs just because they're popular? Are you skimming through your own thoughts, afraid to notice the gaps? The habit of pretending to understand is subtle. It wears many masks: agreement, politeness, even ambition. But underneath, it's always the same: fear of being exposed as someone who doesn't know. Here's the error everyone makes: restricting deep understanding to academic pursuits. But Feynman's lens slices through everything: career, creativity, even personal growth. The habit of genuine inquiry, of admitting ignorance, is the single engine behind all real mastery. It's the difference between memorizing a recipe and actually tasting the food, between reciting a poem and feeling its meaning. If you change this, you change your entire trajectory. You become someone who sees through the fog, not just in classrooms, but in boardrooms, studios, friendships. You become the rare person who actually knows what they're talking about, because you've dared to look, dared to ask, dared to see. You stop living behind the fogged glass and step into the world as it really is. This isn't just learning, it's a way of being. It's the difference between living a life of borrowed ideas and living a life of true understanding. That's the Feynman mind shift. If you've felt that flicker, the sense that you've only been skating across the surface, now is the time to dive. Feynman didn't just ask for curiosity, he demanded honesty from himself. Radical, sometimes uncomfortable honesty. The kind that forces you to admit, "I don't know." And in that moment, the real engine of learning roars to life. Picture your mind as a vast workshop. Most people walk through it in the dark, pretending every lever is familiar, every tool is mastered. But when you switch on the lamp, when you dare to look directly at what you don't know, you see the dust, the broken gears, the parts you never understood. Only then can you fix, build, and truly use the workshop. This is the power of abandoning the pretense of knowledge. The moment you stop faking, you start building. But here's the twist. This isn't just about exams or textbooks. It's about how you approach everything, every conversation, every decision, every belief. Feynman's way was to interrogate his own mind, to strip away the comfort of easy answers. He knew that most people would rather look smart than become smart. They'd rather memorize the label than understand the mechanism. That's the habit that quietly destroys your ability to understand anything deeply. What if you made this your default? What if, every time you studied, you asked, "Do I really get this, or am I just nodding along?" What if you did this at work, in relationships, in every discussion? The habit of honesty is rare, but it's how you escape the mental cage most never notice. The world is full of people reciting, few reconstructing, full of people nodding, few questioning. You can choose which side you're on. Here's your new model. Don't memorize, reconstruct. Don't recite, explain. Don't fear ignorance, hunt it down. Every gap you admit is a door to mastery. Each uncomfortable pause is a chance to sharpen your mind. Feynman called this, quite simply, growing up. It's the difference between living a life of borrowed ideas and living a life of true understanding. It's the Feynman mind shift. So, if this video made a single gear shift in your head, imagine what happens when the whole system turns. Don't just pass through the world repeating what you've heard. Rebuild it inside you. That's the Feynman mind shift. And if you want to feel your brain catch fire with real understanding, you know what to do. Join us for the next mind shift. The engine's just warming up. If you're ready to stop pretending and start understanding, the next step is yours. The door is open. Will you walk through it?